Do you like stories about giants? You must have heard plenty of stories about giants in your childhood. But were they good giants or bad giants? I have heard some very interesting stories about both good and bad giants. And today, I have a short story for you that you will love. It is a story about a giant and it was written by Roald Dahl. If you want to know what the story is about and whether the giant was a good giant or a bad giant, you will need to watch this video. And I assure you that you will not be disappointed. I'm Milane from English Made Easy. This channel will help you learn English with lots of easy and interesting lessons. Today's lesson will help to improve your listening skills, vocabulary, pronunciation, expression, intonation, spelling, and comprehension. All you need to do is to look at your screen and listen to me very carefully while I read the story to you. At the end of the story, I will ask you a few questions to see how well you have understood it. I have circled a few words that I feel you will need to pay a little more attention to, and also written the meanings of some of the words that you will come across on each page just to help you understand the story better. So, without much ado, let's get on with it. The name of the story is The Big Friendly Giant, and it was adapted from Danny, the Champion of the World by Roald Dahl. So, by now, you must have guessed that it is a story about a good giant, not a bad giant. Let us read about a boy called Danny who loved the stories that his father told him. My father was not what you would call an educated man, and I doubt if he had read 20 books in his life. But he was a marvelous storyteller. He used to make up a bedtime story for me every single night, and the best ones turned into serials and went on for many nights running. One of them, which must have gone on for at least 50 nights, was about an enormous fellow called the Big Friendly Giant, or the BFG for short. The BFG was 3 times as tall as an ordinary man, and his hands were as big as wheelbarrows. He lived in a vast underground cavern not far from our filling station, and he only came out into the open when it was dark. Inside the cavern, he had a powder factory where he made more than 100 different kinds of magic powder. Occasionally, as he told his stories, my father would stride up and down, waving his arms and waggling his fingers. But mostly, he would sit close to me on the edge of my bunk and speak very softly. The big friendly giant makes his magic powders out of the dreams that children dream when they are asleep, he said. How? I asked. Tell me how, Dad. Dreams, my love, are very mysterious things. You see, they float around in the night air like little clouds searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? I asked. Nobody can see them. Then how does the big friendly giant catch them? Ah, my father said, that is the interesting part. A dream, you see, as it goes drifting through the night air, makes a tiny buzzing humming sound. A sound so soft and low, it is impossible for ordinary people to hear it. But the BFG can hear it easily. His sense of hearing is absolutely fantastic. I loved the far, intent look on my father's face when he was telling a story. His face was pale and still and distant, unconscious of everything around him. The BFG, he said, can hear the tread of a ladybird's footsteps as she walks across a leaf. He can hear the whisperings of ants as they scurry around in the soil talking to one another. He can hear the sudden shrill cry of pain a tree gives out when a woodman cuts into it with an axe. Ah, yes, my darling, there is a whole world of sounds around us that we cannot hear because our ears are simply not sensitive enough. What happens when he catches the dreams? I asked. He imprisons them in glass bottles and screws the tops down tight, my father said. He has thousands of these bottles in his cave. Does he catch bad dreams as well as good ones? Yes, my father said. He catches both, but he only uses the good ones in his powders. What does he do with the bad ones? He explodes them. It is impossible to tell you how much I loved my father. When he was sitting close to me on my bunk, I would reach out and slide my hand into his, and then he would fold his long fingers around my fist, holding it tight. What does the BFG do with his powders after he has made them? I asked. In the dead of the night, my father said, he goes prowling through the villages, searching for houses where children are asleep. Because of his great height, he can reach windows that are one and even two flights up. And when he finds a room with a sleeping child, he opens his suitcase. His suitcase? I asked. The BFG always carries a suitcase and a blowpipe, my father said. The blowpipe is as long as a lamppost. The suitcase is for powders. So he opens the suitcase and selects exactly the right powder and he puts it into the blowpipe. And he slides the blowpipe in through the open window. And poof! He blows in the powder, and the powder floats around the room, and the child breathes it in. And then what? I asked. And then, Danny, the child begins to dream a marvelous and fantastic dream. And when the dream reaches its most marvelous and fantastic moment, then the magic powder really takes over. And suddenly, the dream is not a dream any longer, but a real happening. And the child is not asleep in bed. He is fully awake and is actually in the place of the dream and is taking part in the whole thing. I mean, really taking part in real life. More about that tomorrow. It's getting late. Good night, Danny. Go to sleep. My father kissed me and then he turned down the wick of the little paraffin lamp until the flame went out. He seated himself in front of the wood stove, which now made a lovely red glow in the dark room. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story. That's the end of it. And now let me ask you a few questions to see how well you did understand it. Are you ready? The first question: who was a marvelous storyteller? I think that's an easy one, don't you? The second question: where was the BFG's powder factory? Do you remember? The third: according to Danny's father, what floated around in the night air like little clouds? And the fourth: what are the three sounds mentioned in the story that the BFG can hear but we cannot? Now, this one is a test of your memory. Let's see if you can remember the three sounds. And the fifth: what does the BFG do with the bad dreams? Okay, now let's see how many of these questions you got right. The first answer was Danny's father was a marvelous storyteller. Who was the marvelous storyteller? Danny's father. The second question was, where was the BFG's powder factory? And the answer, the BFG's powder factory was in a cavern. The third question, according to Danny's father, what floated around in the night air like little clouds? The answer, dreams floated around in the night air like little clouds. The fourth question, what are the three sounds mentioned in the story that the BFG can hear but we cannot? Here's the answer. The BFG can hear the tread of a ladybird's footsteps as she walks across a leaf, the whisperings of ants as they scurry around talking to one another, and the shrill cry of pain that a tree gives out when a woodman cuts into it with an axe. The fifth and last question, what does the BFG do with the bad dreams? The BFG explodes the bad dreams. He has no use for it. So, how many of these questions did you get right? I hope you got them all right, if not at least four of them. So, how often have you had a dream that seemed real? Will you wake up in the middle of the night and look out of your window hoping to catch sight of the BFG? Or will you lie in bed under the covers and look for a powdery glow blowing in through the open window? I do hope you enjoyed the story and that it was an interesting English lesson as well. I did another lesson on a famous childhood story yesterday. Remember the Three Little Pigs? It's a famous one with the famous words from the wolf: I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down. Everyone knows that story, right? Well, that lesson was the same story but in poetry form. It is called The Three Little Pigs, and that one was also written by Roald Dahl. It is an interesting poem, and while it begins in the usual manner, it has an unusual twist at the end. I'm sure you will enjoy it. This is the video here. Do watch it. You will be pleasantly surprised and you will enjoy it completely. I'll be back tomorrow with another easy and interesting lesson in English. But before I end, I would like to ask you what you liked best about the story that I did today. The BFG, the big friendly giant. And until we meet again, sweet dreams and may they all come true. Bye.